share what inspired you to become a comparative religious teacher?
Well, I have to go way back to spring of 1954. I was 22 years old, and I had finished my MBA, and I got my first job with the New England Mutual Life Insurance Company. And that's a story how that came about. But and I during the course of my seeking customers, I met a fellow named Ted Chenoweth, and I didn't know anything, didn't realize this, but I attended the University of California at Berkeley, but I lived in San Francisco with my parents. I was a commute student. It was the most economical way to do that. So I didn't realize it, but there was a Vedanta temple in Berkeley next to the famous People's Park, which you may have heard about the riots in Berkeley in the 60s. And I didn't know about it. But anyway, I met Ted. He didn't buy any insurance, but he gave me a great gift. He mentioned to me that on every Sunday evening, he went to the Vedanta temple to hear the Swami give a lecture on Vedanta. And I said, "What's Vedanta? You mean there's a temple in Berkeley?" And he explained it to me. So I decided to go to the temple. I always had an interest in philosophy and spiritual matters, but I never studied it formally in school. And anyway, I went and heard my first lecture on Vedanta, and I loved it. I was so inspired by the Swami, and then hearing about the infinite unchanging, and I went outside and I started thinking about it. Then I realized I didn't have a clue about what he was talking about. It was so different from me. Uh, I didn't realize it, but it was pure non-duality. Advaita, Advaita, Vedanta, the three schools of Vedanta. This is the non-dual of Shankaracharya. And but I intuitively felt I heard something of great value. I was too young to think about becoming a renunciate at age 22, but that's how I encountered Vedanta. So now to get to your question, how do I had intended to have a business career and wear a gray suit and stay in business, but so that Vedanta seed was planted in me. Then in the course, I had technical training in insurance, and in 1956, the telephone rang. And the telephone rang, and the head of the local association asked me to teach a technical course in insurance at the local Merit College, which is one of the Peralta colleges. He says, "It's every Tuesday afternoon, and you're the only person in our group that's had formal education in these technical aspects. Would you teach it?" I said, "Okay, I'll do that." Well, that gave me a foothold. It was a very interesting experience because when I went into the room, there were about 50 people there, and they were all had been in business for at least a year. And when I entered the room, they all stopped talking, and I said, "Oh, what's going on?" Then I realized I was the youngest person in the room. Well, I soon won them over, and the course was a success. And I did that every Tuesday afternoon for 2 years, and that made a relationship between me and Peralta, and some other courses came up. The phone rang again in 1961, and they wanted me to come on board full time. And that's how I got into teaching. So going into business, meeting Ted, then getting the job, all fell together. I didn't solicit anything. It all just came naturally. That's what was so interesting. People usually fight for jobs to get a teaching job in the Bay Area where many people like to live. I didn't do any chasing. The phone rang, people called me up. So I realized later in life, this was the divine will as far as I was concerned.
Thank you. Because in the initial few pages of your book, you have mentioned about the phone rang again.
By the time by the time the early 1970s arrived, I had already completed 20 years in business or teaching business, and I was really ready for a change. And then the phone rang, and the head of the social science department and Tom Trent invited me to lunch. I was suspicious. I thought they wanted to put me on some kind of committee. And then I was shocked when they said, we will like you to start teaching interpersonal relations group therapy because you're the, and I said, well, I never had a course in psychology. And then they looked at me and said, you had 10 years of serious group therapy and personal work. I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll make a life change. I'm ready. But the school's got to help finance me to get my bachelor's and master's degree in psychology simultaneously. So all of a sudden, I was a psychology teacher, and I went back to school and got my bachelor's and master's degrees in psychology 20 years after I had gotten my MBA, a true Gemini. And then after a few years, another colleague called me, and Marlis, and she was the world religions teacher. And she says, I'm retiring early, and you're the only person that knows anything about Eastern thought, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to recommend that you take over the religions course. I said, thank you very much. I'd love to do that. So the phone rang again. I never did anything. The phone kept ringing to teach, to go teach business, then to teach psychology, then to teach religion. It was amazing. And then after I'm teaching religion, the phone starts ringing and I get invited to speak at different places pro bono all the time. I never charge. And that's the story. I also during this time became a member of the Theosophical Society and a Buddhist group. I love spiritual organizations that have good intent, and so it opened me up. And then in 1970, jumping around here a bit, instead of I got something in the mail, not the phone ringing, from the University of California to come and fly with the boys in the band. And that sounds strange, but in 1970, they had the great exposition in Kyoto, Japan. And the University of California marching band was invited to participate. And they hired a plane to fly the boys in the band to Japan. But they had extra seats and they were trying to sell them to alumni in order to help finance them. So I thought, I'll go to Japan this summer instead of Greece, where my parents had been born, my roots. And so, but this was very much to do with my spiritual path, because in Japan, while I toured around for 1 month, I met my friend Bernard, and a French fellow who spent 5 years on the road. And we became friends. And I said, well, when you travel through California, come and stay with me at my house. He said, fine. We became friends. Well, in due course, but then Bernard left. And then in 1979, the phone rang. It's Bernard. He says, Alix. He had a very strong French accent. Alix. Yes, Bernard, I know it's you. How could I not know it's you? He says, I am at the New Delhi airport with my guru, Swami Prem Varni from Rishikesh. And he's arriving tomorrow at San Francisco International Airport. Pick him up. I said, thank you for all the notice. So the next day I'm on my way to the airport to pick up the Swami. What am I going to do with the Swami? In effect, my house became an ashram for 8 or 9 months.
Okay.
And his disciples and friends in America were coming to the house. So I reserved my own bedroom and bath, and I surrendered the house. And it was a wonderful thing. Every morning we would get up, we would meditate, we would do hatha yoga, they would cook vegetarian cooking, and it was a wonderful experience. There were some bumps, egos involved, people coming, but that's all part of the learning. And I never became a disciple of Swami Premrani, but a devotee and a good friend. And so that inspired me to start making trips to India. And of course, this all kindled my memories of going to Vedanta in 1954. So starting in 79 on, I became very active in the Vedanta Society in Berkeley and going to India many times. I could go on and on and on, but you get the idea. So it was my destiny. I ran into Bernard, and then Bernard calls me from the airport, and that's the story.